So where are you hiking this weekend?
I'm not exactly even sure where I need to look because the original plan was to backpack somewhere else, but the massive snow we've gotten here has made dangerous conditions. Not here, I mean, here. Yeah. California, Oregon, and Washington have been just the snow is like crazy, and with the high temperatures that we've been having, all that snow is melting and it's causing dangerous, well, they're called creek crossings, but they are dangerous raging rivers at this point. So we had to alter our plans to hike somewhere else, and it's not going to be as nice of a trip because we're not going to be as high up. So we're going to hit the heat, unfortunately, this weekend. And when I say heat, I mean in the 90s, which is bad when you're schlepping all your gear. I mean, all my gear is on my back, so. Oh. So I haven't really looked into too much where I'm going. It's called Kennedy Meadow Campgrounds, where we're starting, and it is in the Sierras, but it's not like it's going to be the beautiful Sierras that it would have been.
Now, for the super fancy edition hiking backpacks, like when I wear my regular backpack and it's hot out, it's pressing against my back and it's just gross by the end of the day.
Yeah.
Do they sell like spacers so that like the backpack doesn't rest right on your back? You like get some airflow in there?
Yeah, my day pack has a what sits on my back is like mesh, and then there's a gap of like 2 inches before the backpack hits. Now, unfortunately, I have a sweating issue, so even with that space, I'm completely soaked back there. But it's nice when the breeze comes through that space. It's like, ooh, But unfortunately, my backpack, the one for backpacking, does not have that space, so it's way worse. But it's an ultralight pack, and you just have to deal with you're trying to save weight. So you're dealing with not having that space there.
That's why I bring a donkey.
Some people actually do. Some people hike with llamas and mules, so you can hire them. So some people have have had surgeries on their shoulders, and they just cannot carry the weight anymore. So they hire. I think it's typically llamas or llamas or goats, and they backpack with them, and you just kind of string them up on a tree overnight. And I guess they have a whole lot of fun with you too. It's expensive.
How much does a llama get paid?
I don't know.
That'd be a good job.
Wow.
Go be a hiking llama.
Pack for them, or anything. They just I guess graze as they go, or I don't even know.
Yeah, I do the same thing. Are there any bars along the way? Because if so, I'm in.
Some people bring fishing poles, and then
it's right up with you.
Yeah.
All right, I guess we'll start with the questions, because there's one that's really good. Ben asks how the bears deal with all the goats, and I'll be like, okay, we're not answering that. Brian asks, he says, in SQL Server 2016 and below, Microsoft says cross-database transactions aren't supported with AGs, but I'm testing it and it seems to be worked. What's the big deal? Why shouldn't I do cross-database transactions in AGs?
It's not that you can't do them. I think what's going to happen on the rollback, isn't that where the issue? There could be an issue on the rollback. So as long as your servers are up and there's no issue, it's going to look like it's working. I would test, just do a begin tran in one of them and do some do a bit of changes, and then restart one of the servers. Do this in a test environment, obviously, and if it's on the same server, you're crossing to the same instance. Just take the other database offline and see what happens on rollback.
Now, what's the gotcha around distributed transactions, like when you actually use DTC and not just cross-database?
If you think with AG 2016, I just did an AG client yesterday, so I have this fresh in my memory. But you need Windows 2016, and our deck says that it's somewhat supported. DTC support and Windows 2016, sort of.
It's so bad. It's only supported between two databases on different servers, which so you can do a cross-database transaction. They can't be in the same AG. They can't be on the same server. So it's if you go to the Books Online page about the AG support for DTC, scroll all the way to the bottom. There's a beautiful example just in plain English, like a thought experiment that shows you why you lose data.
I think they fixed that up a little bit for 2017, like it's fully supported.
Yeah, it's totally supported.
On the same server and everything.
There's a gotcha. When you set up the AG, you have to define where you want to lose data. Do you want, if you have extra data in one database, do you want to discard it, or how do you want to react to it?
Oh, that gave me the chills. I'm sorry.
Yeah. But at least it's supported, because how often does that really happen? That you fail over mid-transaction. It's, I say it sarcastically and facetiously, but right. Yeah, on purpose, you would just do a planned failover, and it would be pretty graceful. It wouldn't be a big
everyone
deal.
out.
Yeah, out of the pool. JH says, is it safe and best practices to switch all my agent job owners to SA? He said, I'm worried about someone leaving and having their login disabled. What do you guys do for agent job owners?
That.
Yep. Yeah. That's the best practice. I had a client recently where I had to, I created an SP who was active job so that it would start collecting some data for us. And they saw me adding SA as the job owner. They're like, oh, wait a second, SA is disabled. It's like, doesn't matter. Still is going to work.
MM says, this is probably good for Richie. MM says, I'm trying to help a developer. I already love this guy. Or a woman, who knows? MM, I can't tell. I'm trying to help a developer and myself to improve performance. We have a query that every day it joins a table across network servers using linked servers or open query, and it's trying to compare 60 million rows, 11 columns on both of them, one-to-one. What are my best options?
Unsubscribe. You need to use SSIS for that type of thing. Don't do this type of stuff in T-SQL. SSIS can handle this more efficiently than T-SQL can.
Yeah, Richie, what's your thoughts too?
Yeah, my first thought was move everything to one server, but yeah, SSIS would be better, especially with that kind of load, 60 million rows. Yeah, probably better.
And if it's only once a day, if you wanted to move everything onto the same server, you just do a restore. You just back up, take your nightly backups and restore them over onto the other server because it doesn't have to be up to the exact moment in time.
Yep.
Let's see here. Michelle. See, I remembered your name from last week. Michelle says, can you guys explain Columnstore indexes? I got to start reading these questions before I ask them.
Erik, that's on you. And go.
Well, you see, this is dictionary. So Columnstore indexes are neat. They are meant for big analytical or data warehouse type workloads. They have excellent compression. And assuming that you have all your row groups and you're not using any data types that disagree with Columnstore indexes, like, for example, strings, and you don't care much about constraints, they're great. But there are a lot of gotchas with them, probably too many for me to get into here. And also they're not good for OLTP type workloads because when you're doing lots of little inserts, updates, and or deletes, you end up with all sorts of bad things that, like, you end up with things that don't get compressed correctly or fully, and it's just not really a good scene for that.
So let's see. Dorian says, does Microsoft have any plans to get rid of linked servers?
I don't know how you would.
I don't think you could.
Yeah,
one could only hope.
And cursors and triggers. And
everything I don't like.
And I would like a pony. No, yeah, so probably not, because as long as anything's being used out there in the wild, Microsoft's all about adoption rate. Like, they want to get more people using the product, and taking stuff away is a surefire way to get them to stop upgrading.
And plus, if you take away linked servers, you take away a very easy path that people have to take data from another platform and put it into SQL Server and start paying Microsoft money for licensing.
That's true.
How else do you get off MySQL?
Well, you make that face. You're using Postgres right now, so at least it's better than MySQL.
Don't even
put it's a hell of a lot better than MySQL.
Different universes, man.
Yeah, pretty much.
JH says, does AWS offer contractors to help us migrate SQL Server databases up into the AWS cloud?
They're called snowballs.
Oh, that's true. Talk about what Snowball is.
They send you a cooler with a disk drive in it, and you move all your data to it, and then you ship it back to Amazon, and then Amazon puts it magically up into the cloud. So if you're dealing with terabytes and terabytes of data, it's awesome because it's much safer and quicker to do that. I don't imagine the feeling of upload failed on like 10 terabytes. So it's a lot safer and easier way to do things, and so probably they wipe the disk that they sent you before they give it to anyone else.
AWS Snowball, very cool. And do they have consultants? Yeah, sure, absolutely. And there's tons of people out there. That's not something that we do. We don't help you with the migration process, although we do help you sketch out should you go to AWS or not, and should you do RDS or EC2. Steven says, thank you so much for running these sessions. You're welcome. I watch every week on YouTube, and this is my first time watching live. Oh, very cool. He says, what's the best way to use SSRS with always on? We're moving to always on with a synchronous readable secondary. Okay, so let me stop there and ask. So is it a good, or what are your thoughts when you hear synchronous readable secondary?
I'm like, yes. The only is, I've supported a very, extremely mission critical system that had high performance requirements and extremely busy system. And you have to be careful on that synchronous readable secondary, because the load there can impact your writable side. And we certainly had issues with that. But our reports had to be near real time, and an asynchronous readable secondary could have significant latency depending upon your transactions. We didn't do index rebuilds on the system anymore because of the latency on the synchronous server, the blocking that it would cause there. But a lot of people are doing index rebuilds, and just imagine what the latency would be on the asynchronous readable secondary. So I'm okay with what he's saying. It's just that you have to make sure you have the hardware to support it, the indexes to support your queries, and the right queries on that synchronous readable secondary. If you don't, you're going to cause problems on your primary replica.
And Tara's talking about rebuilding indexes, which I totally agree with. That's a pain in the butt with AGs. But even if you find that after you put stuff over on the secondary, and all of a sudden you have this additional change, this additional reporting workload, or a change in reporting workload, and you need new indexes, even creating indexes over there, which is the same effect as rebuilding, can be difficult. So words of caution there as well.
Yeah. He has a follow-up part that says, would it be best to install SSRS on that secondary node or have another VM with SSRS on it? And that probably answers your question there. As little workload as you can get on that VM is probably a good idea. That,
and the best practice is not to put SSRS on your SQL servers anyway. This needs to go on a separate server.
And why?
Well, I mean, I'm all about SQL servers being dedicated to SQL Server. Yes, SSRS is a SQL Server product, but it's really a separate product. I'm talking about the database engine. Only supporting software like maybe antivirus software or tape backup software should go on your server. But everything else, SSRS can go on a smaller VM. It doesn't need the capacity that we have for the database engine.
And that's generally our recommendation for any of the sort of like tertiary non-engine components, SSIS, ASRS, put them on a different server. You don't want them competing with your SQL server, just because those resources are precious, and unless you have things really well defined with how much stuff actually needs, they're going to walk on each other, and it's not going to be pretty.
James says, we have two SANs. We have one SAN just used for data and one SANs for backups. To make life easier in the event of either SAN failure, where would I store my SQL Server backups? Should I store my SQL Server backups to the data SAN or to the backup SAN where my VM backups are kept?
Yes.
Oh, that's kind of interesting. Yeah.
I would do both. I would have them in both places.
I kind of like where you're going with that. Well, yeah, because you don't want to lose point-in-time recoverability if you lose either SAN.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a good point. And your backups aren't usually that big. I mean, you don't have to keep 30 days of backups on both SANs. But Ben says, if SSRS is on a separate SQL server, does that require a separate license?
Sure does. Yeah. Sorry, best practice.
It was cheap. You might be able to get by with standard too. You may not need Enterprise Edition there.
And it can be a much smaller VM, like on your regular one, you might have, 16, 24 cores. On the SSRS one, you might be able to get with, 4, 6, 8.
Mm-hmm. Cebu asks, do you guys have any experience with using Always On with 5 replicas with CDC enabled? What are some of the issues that might happen? Have any of you guys use CDC?
I have used CDC, but it was not on an availability group server. I can't really think of issues. Well, I can think of one issue. CDC uses the transaction log. That's where everything gets logged. And so you've got CDC reading the transaction log, and you've got the availability groups reading the transaction logs on what to send out to the other server. So I know when you have replication and database mirroring, those could have contention because everything's reading the transaction log. So there's trace flags in place that can help you to have, I think it's like have replication skip over the mirroring records, things like that. I wonder if there's something for CDC that would allow it to, so it doesn't have to scan everything in the transaction log because I've had issues with that in the past. I have supported systems with 5 replicas, but not with CDC enabled.
Gotcha. Cebu, if you want more info in there too, you might want to let us know what you're going to use those 5 replicas for, what you need all 5 for, and maybe what you're using CDC for as well. Folks, we're down to a couple of questions left in the queue. If you have questions, feel free to put them in over in the questions pane and go to webinar. Alexandre asks, guys, what is Microsoft Cosmo DB?
It's what Document DB used to be.
And go on about, so is it just a rename or?
I have read nothing about it. I know that it used to be Document DB, and it's a NoSQL document store with lots of JSON involved, and that's where I bail out. That's where I pull the parachute, whether I'm jumping or not.
Yeah, didn't they add some other types to that as opposed to document is key value pairs and stuff like that?
Yeah, they had Document DB for the longest time, and it wasn't catching on. And I know we looked at it, I think, using it briefly for execution plans, but the maximum document size was like 400K. So it was like a key value store originally. Then they just kept layering more capabilities on top of it. And now with the new Cosmo DB, they renamed it. They clicked File, Save As in Visual Studio, and they saved it under a different name. Now Cosmo DB has all kinds of other things it can store instead of just 400K key value pairs. But in terms of like us knowing any more than that, no. Because stuff like all the NoSQL databases, you generally have to write your front-end app differently or your back-end apps differently to access data in different ways. It's not like they're just capable of accepting insert updates and deletes. You have some different work to do. So it's not lightweight. James says, our beautiful and attractive developers store attachments in the database. So I have a lot of columns that are var binary max. Is it possible to compress my backups? Ooh, well, so generally, if it's binary files, they're probably not all that compressible to begin with. Like if it's Excel or PowerPoint.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about like that sort of the way that gobbledygook compresses when you use TDE, and I don't think that does too well either. I wonder if even like page compression would work well on those at all.
If it's off-row data, you're screwed. Yeah. As soon as it goes off-row, you're out of luck. What I would do is if you have anything like I always blast dedupe appliances. I'm like, dedupe appliances are horrible for SQL Server backups, but this is kind of what they're designed for. They use additional CPU power in order to do like single instance storage. It might actually help you out there. But the other thing you could try is you could just try zipping or RARing your backups, just the files, see if they compress at all. If they don't, you're screwed.
Yeah, we have a 7-zip script. What I would focus on rather than that is trying to talk my developers out of doing that, just storing pointers to the files on the file system, getting rid of the blob files in the database, and just pointing to wherever they live and letting SQL find them or letting the application find them that way. Just doing the lookups through SQL.
So
Brian, go ahead.
If the developers are beautiful, does that mean they took beauty over brawn? Or beauty over brains?
He actually said they were stupid, but I didn't want to say.
I was going to say. I read the question.
I'm like, come on.
Oh, there it is. Yeah, stupid developers. Well, I can't argue with that one.
Man. So there's my little soapboxes. We always think, I say we, as database administrators, a lot of us have this inflated ego, like we know everything and those other people in the shop are stupid. And then we run SP Blitz on your servers and I go, you don't have any pants on. You just stop calling other people stupid. You don't have backup set up. Brian says, for availability groups, can you take differentials and log backups on my or which backups can I take? Fulls, differentials, or logs on my secondary replicas?
No differentials and only full copy onlys, but you can take log backups there. I don't recommend taking backups on secondaries, honestly, because there could be they could be out of date. Even a synchronous commit replica can be out of date. SQL Server could drop it to an asynchronous replica silently because of some timeout issues with syncing the data over there. So I've only ran all my backups on the primary replica. And if you're trying to offload that kind of task, I wonder, if maybe you've got some I/O issues. Why are you having to offload a backup task? I mean, since when do backups cause issues?
Tara, you say that you said one thing in there very casually, but it's something that no one it's something that I forget a lot about AGs is that behind the scenes, they could get dropped to async if SQL Server detects enough latency, and that's something that's insane.
I actually didn't even know that, until I saw the blog post from, I think it was Brent, with the quote from the the MSDN. It's like, oh, I wonder if that actually ever happened to me. I have no idea, because it's doing it silently. You don't know, and I never had an issue with failovers. Obviously a failover is not going to occur if it is an asynchronous replica. It's going to say you can't do it right now, or whatever it's going to say. So I don't even know if it's ever occurred on the systems I've supported.
That is not a bolded bullet point in the Microsoft pamphlet about availability groups. That is not. That is not upfront.
That gives me an idea. I should totally do a blog post of my favorite little hidden nuggets in books online, just gems. Because the one like the missing index DMVs, column order is not part of our recommendations. We're just giving you a CSV list of fields. And everybody assumes that when they see the missing index creation in an execution plan or in the DMVs, they're like, oh, this must be the order, right? They're comma delimited.
Did that issue exist for database mirroring, for synchronous database mirroring?
I don't remember if it was in books online or not, because I hardly ever use synchronous database mirroring.
Yeah.
It's one of those. Yeah. Looked really cool, but MM asks, some of our servers have full text indexing turned on and other ones don't. The architecture was set up by an accidental DBA. Could this be affecting performance? How do I know if full text index is being used, or can I just turn it off?
Turn it off and wait for the problems.
That would be my plan.
I've had it installed on most of my servers, on failover cluster instances where it might be hard to add later, and it doesn't cause any performance issues. I have when I've had performance issues on a cluster, I'm looking to maybe stop some services, and I have had issues where that service was failing. That cluster resource was failing, and I didn't want to bother with troubleshooting, so I just deleted the resource, because I didn't need it. I've never had it cause performance issues where it wasn't being used.
Yeah, like I'm trying to think of ways you can figure it out. Like like maybe if you looked at like the last crawl date, like if you looked at some of the DMVs for full text indexes, you could see the last crawl date and the last crawl completed date. You might want to look through your plan cache to see if there are any queries that have like contains or contains table, and I'll make a deal with you. If you can send me a query that has XML for that uses full text, I'll see if I can get something into Blitz cache that detects when full text indexes get used. I can't guarantee it, because I don't know if it's going to be in the cache plan versus the actual plan, but I'll see if I can do something with it.
Dorian says, I saw an ad from somebody where companies can pay to have a DBA look at their databases. Do you see this as becoming the norm? Well, given that that's what we do for a living, yes.
Oh, we should be the only ones doing it. Huge outlier.
And it's funny, several of us on here have been through, the way I originally got started with it was Microsoft's RAP. They have this, I think it's called a risk assessment program, or risk assessment something or other.
Something, yeah.
But I went through that process and I was like, this is amazing. You learn so much. They give you like a 400-page PDF of everything about the database. And I was like, well, I really just want the TLDR. I just want the too long didn't read. Give me the 5 things I need to do or whatever. But yeah, it seems to be working out well. We get clients, so knock on wood. I should touch wood. Cebu on his 5-node availability group, he clarifies back in. He says, he's got 2 nodes for high availability, 2 nodes for disaster recovery in another location, and then a 3rd node for reporting that's all set up in with the primary. They're all set up.
Wearing a tux to work.
Right?
That's actually what basically the same exact configuration I had when I first deployed availability groups. Synchronous replica. We actually had 2 synchronous replicas. Secondary replicas on SQL 2012. One was for reporting because it needed near real-time reporting, and the other one was the failover node, and then two asynchronous servers out in DR. We actually had 3 out there because we needed exact hardware that we did at the primary site. In case we had to do a failover to that environment, we had to run full power. But in 2012, you can only have 4 secondary replicas, so we had a cold standby. Microsoft wanted us to log ship to it. I was like, I'll set it. Once we do the manual failover, that's when I'll pull that one into the AG. Yeah.
Let's see. Steven says, if we don't have transparent data encryption because we're only on standard edition, what's the best way to encrypt our data? Should I consider BitLocker? it's going to kill me that NetLib. So there's a company called NetLib, NETLIB, that offers a filter driver that sits in between SQL Server and the file storage, and they'll encrypt the data. It's way cheaper than Enterprise Edition. I've never used it. I did a webcast for them years ago, and I was like looking at the product. I'm like, this is kind of amazing. But I've heard good things about it since. I just haven't used it myself. So NetLib, NETLIB.
That's interesting that they picked that for their company name, because that's the net library. That's the deal. That's how you connect to see the database drivers. I believe the NetLib was the GUI tool. I think.
Yeah,
it was an odd name.
You know, I mean, I just go the nuclear option.
Go ahead.
Have the app encrypted.
And so we'll talk about what the advantages of that are.
So the advantages of that is that, you know, from the app and all the way to the database, the data will be encrypted. So that's the big thing. And then if you don't want anybody who has database access to be able to get to that data, it will be encrypted in the data. The problem is that if you want to do a SQL query on that, it's kind of encrypted too.
Linked server queries, replication, etc.
Yeah, I would just avoid BitLocker because that only encrypts the drive, and if you move data off the drive, it's not encrypted. And if you have BitLocker on other drives, like I have it on my laptop, every time I boot my laptop up, I have to unlock the D drive. If you have a server go down and come back up, you have to have someone unlock that drive, or it's not really all that BitLocked. if it's just available when you start up, it's not as useful.
Srijith says, can you please provide a reference link for an AG secondary backup can cause an issue due to loss of connectivity? I don't know if we can do a reference link or whatever. I would just say kind of think through it. If the primary stops sending data to the secondary, if, for example, if the secondary restarts or gets behind, you can back up that thing every minute. But if it doesn't have fresh data and your primary goes down, hope that resume is up to date.
Even just a network hiccup could put things behind a little bit.
Ben says, and I hear this about the cloud too, Ben says, if you're on a SAN, don't most SANs have an option for encrypted storage? Oh man, so this is kind of tricky. So a lot of SANs have the opportunity, or like Azure calls it SSE, self-signed encryption stuff, where they go, Scout's honor promise, everything's encrypted and we can't access it. You don't have to set up a key. We just do it for you automatically. And that's true right up until you do something like take a backup. You can take a backup of your database to another location. Doesn't matter if it's encrypted at rest. You're still kind of screwed there. Same thing with querying the data, like Richie pointed out. If you're worried about the DBA selling your data to the Russians, you're still kind of out of luck there.
Duh.
Go ahead.
No, duh, yes. He's I agree with you very much, yes.
That was a full sentence.
There are a lot of Russians in in South, I would keep wanting to say North Cuba or South Miami, right? There's a Russian contingency there.
Yeah, they're like in North Miami Beach. Yeah, so.
And then MM asks, somehow all our power plans reverted to balanced. I've seen this with group policy. Group policy's done this. Have you ever seen an instance where going from basic to high performance has caused a problem? Ooh, that's a good question. I don't think so. Not that I can think of. I've seen it going the other way. You know, going from high performance to basic has caused a problem.
You should be able to just do it live. Don't even have to reboot the server.
Yeah.
The only comment, you need to look at your BIOS, and if this is a VM environment, also look at the host level setting.
And then the last question we'll take for today, Stephen asks, would you rather be chased by 1,000 duck-sized horses or one horse-sized duck? It's a tongue twister even.
I'll take the one duck.
Yeah,
the one duck.
Take the one.
Oh, I don't know. See, I think I would die of laughter if I was being chased by 1,000 duck-sized horses. I would kind of I'd just lay down and go see what happens until they start peeing on me. That would probably be nice.
If I was being chased by one horse-sized duck, I would wonder if I'm in one of those movies from, a few decades ago where it's like these giant, insects are coming through the city.
Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, too.
I'd wonder if I was dreaming.
You know what the problem with the little horses is? They'd be too cute. Remember that there was that commercial? I forget what it was for, but the guy had a miniature pet giraffe. And at the end of the commercial, like him and like it was like a CGI pet giraffe, and he would like give it a little kiss and giggle. I forget that was, but I saw it and I was like, holy cow! If you could genetically engineer me a miniature giraffe, that would be my pet. It would just sit right here on my desk with a little pillow and hang out. I would psyched on that. So like when I think miniature horses, I think about that giraffe, and I'm like, that would be adorable.
Yeah, but think about it. Horses are still going to be pretty fast, even if they're miniature, right? But a duck is still going to be waddling around pretty slow. I could probably outmaneuver a horse-sized duck as opposed to these, 1,000 tiny horses, almost like fast-moving zombies on me. Yeah, I'm not about that.
That's true. I buy that. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we will end this edition of Office Hours. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.